She thought she was saving a dying man. She didn't know his blood would bind her soul to his forever. When herbalist Ilara touched the wounded stranger's silver-glowing skin, ancient prophecy awakened, and two worlds began to collide. Subscribe now to discover what happens when mortal mercy meets fey magic. Moonlight filtered through ancient oaks as frost crept across her fingertips, and she realized the beautiful dying man before her was anything but human. The forest knew things before Ilara did. She'd learned that lesson in her 26 years living on the edge of Silverwood. The way birdsong would cease before storms. How mushrooms glowed brighter when fae crossed nearby. The particular silence that fell when something ancient walked between the trees. Tonight, that silence pressed against her cottage windows like a living thing, thick and expectant. Ilara set down her mortar, winterberry paste forgotten. The pestle clattered against wood as she moved to the window, pressing her palm against cold glass. Beyond her herb garden, beyond the protective circle of rowan trees she'd planted 5 years ago, the forest waited. Mist curled between massive oaks, luminescent and wrong. It was the kind of mist that didn't come from weather. It came from the veil thinning. "Not tonight," she whispered to the darkness. "Please, not tonight." She'd already gathered the elderflower for Mrs. Thatch's joint pain, prepared the feverfew tincture for the blacksmith's daughter, bundled the dried lavender for the merchant's anxiety. Tomorrow was market day in Thornwick Village, 3 miles down the mountain path. She needed rest, not whatever supernatural drama the forest was brewing. The scream shattered her resolve. It wasn't human, not entirely. The sound held too many harmonics, like crystal breaking and wind howling and something else she had no words for. It echoed through Silverwood, making her cottage walls tremble, sending glass bottles rattling on their shelves. Then it cut off abruptly, leaving silence more terrible than the sound itself. Ilara's hands moved before her mind caught up. She grabbed her healing satchel, fingers automatically checking contents. Bandages, needle and thread, yarrow for bleeding, poppy extract for pain, salt for protection, iron nails just in case. Her grandmother's voice echoed in memory. "Never enter Silverwood after dark, child. Never answer fae calls. Never, ever offer help to something that bleeds silver." She was breaking at least 2 of those rules tonight. The front door opened to cold that had nothing to do with autumn temperature. This was bone-deep, soul-freezing cold that made her breath crystallize instantly. Frost crept across her doorstep in patterns too geometric to be natural. Snowflakes within snowflakes, recursive and mathematical and beautiful. Fey magic. Definitely fey magic. Ilara pulled her wool cloak tighter and stepped into the garden. Her boots crunched on suddenly frozen grass. Each step away from her cottage felt like walking underwater, resistance building with every foot. The protective circle of rowan trees whispered warnings, their leaves rustling despite the still air. "I know," she told them. "I know this is stupid." But she'd become a healer for a reason. Her mother had died of fever while the village doctor was drunk. Her father had bled out from a farming accident because no one knew how to pack a wound properly. She'd spent 10 years studying every herb, every remedy, every technique she could find, making a vow. If she could help, she would, even if it was dangerous, even if it was foolish, even if it was fey. The mist grew thicker as she entered the forest proper, passing the invisible boundary that separated her claimed land from the ancient wild. Temperature dropped another impossible degree. Her lantern flame turned blue-white, and shadows moved with purpose rather than randomness. She found him in the hollow of a fallen oak. At first, she thought someone had spilled liquid starlight on the forest floor. Silver luminescence pooled around a figure collapsed against moss-covered bark, and it took her brain several seconds to understand she was looking at blood. Not red, not human, but silver that glowed with its own internal light, beautiful and terrifying. The man, creature, being, was dying. She knew it instantly with healer's instinct. His breathing came shallow and rapid, each exhale producing frost crystals. His skin, where it wasn't covered in blood, was pale as moonlight and just as luminous. Dark hair fell across a face too perfect to be human, features sharp and elegant like someone had carved beauty itself from ice. And there, beneath his shredded shirt, a wound gaped across his ribs. The edges looked burned, and she could smell iron. Actual iron, the metal that was poison to Faye. "Iron blade," she murmured, kneeling beside him, her knees soaked through immediately from the blood-wet ground. "Someone wanted you dead." His eyes opened. They were silver, too, not gray, but true metallic silver, like mirrors reflecting starlight. They fixed on her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. For a moment, neither of them moved. She saw ancient weariness in those eyes, centuries compressed into a single gaze, and something else. Surprise. As if he hadn't expected anyone to come, as if he'd been prepared to die alone. "Mortal," he breathed, voice like wind through winter branches. "You should run." "Probably," Alara agreed, already opening her satchel. "But I'm not going to." The iron, still inside, poisoning. Each word seemed to cost him enormous effort. "I see it." She did. The wound's edges were blackening, necrosis spreading. Iron poisoned Faye the way venom poisoned humans, working through the bloodstream, shutting down their magic and, eventually, their life. This is going to hurt. Already. Dying. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Can't. Hurt worse. He was wrong. Ilara worked quickly, hands steady despite her racing heart. She packed the wound with salt first. It made him convulse, back arching. But salt drew out poison. Then she used her smallest knife, sterilized in lantern flame, to probe for the iron fragment. His blood burned cold against her fingers, so cold it felt like fire. The silver luminescence stained her hands, her sleeves, soaking into her skin. She found the fragment, a thin piece of iron blade, deliberately broken off inside him. Whoever had done this knew Faye anatomy. They'd placed it perfectly to ensure slow death. Almost. "There," she muttered, gripping the fragment with cloth-wrapped fingers. When she pulled it free, he screamed. The sound was inhuman and heartbreaking, echoing through Silverwood. Every bird within a mile took flight. The mist turned solid white, swirling in violent patterns. And something else happened. The fragment in her hand crumbled to rust instantly, while the silver blood on her skin began to glow brighter. Too bright. Alara tried to pull her hands away, but they wouldn't move. She was frozen in place, kneeling beside him, her salt and blood-covered hands pressed against his wound. The glow intensified until she had to close her eyes against it. She felt something flowing between them. Not just blood, but essence. Magic. Life force. Whatever it was Faye were made of, it was pouring into her, and something of her was pouring into him. "No," the Faye gasped. "No. You don't understand. Don't touch. The prophecy. Too late." The light exploded outward in a silent shockwave that flattened the mist, bent trees, and sent Alara's consciousness spinning into silver brilliance. When awareness returned, she was on her back, staring up at autumn stars through the forest canopy. Her body hummed with strange energy, as if lightning had replaced her blood. Every nerve ending sang. The world looked different, sharper, more detailed. Colors she'd never seen before bleeding at the edges of normal vision. And she could feel him, not physically, but in some deeper way. She knew he was still alive, could sense his heartbeat alongside her own. Knew he was breathing easier now, the poison purged. Knew he was sitting up, staring at her with absolute horror on his inhumanly beautiful face. What? Alara's voice came out strange, resonant. What just happened? You saved my life, he said quietly. His voice still sounded like winter, but stronger now. And in doing so, you've doomed us both. I don't understand. He looked at her with those mirror silver eyes, and she saw fear there. Real, genuine fear from a being who'd probably never been afraid of anything mortal in his long life. My name is Elendor of the Winter Court, he said. Exiled prince, oathbreaker, and according to prophecy that's 3,000 years old, your soul-bound mate, because you touched royal fey blood with healing intent, mortal woman, because you showed mercy when you should have walked away. I'm a healer, Alara said slowly, sitting up. The world tilted, and suddenly he was there, steadying her with a hand that radiated cold. It's what I do. I know. His expression was infinitely sad. That's why the prophecy chose you. Pure intent, selfless action. It's rare. Rare enough to trigger bonds that haven't formed in centuries. He released her carefully, as if she might shatter. What's your name? Alara Winterborn. He laughed, a sound like ice cracking. Winterborn, of course. Even your name fits the prophecy. From winter's line shall mortal come, with blood like ice and heart like home. He stood slowly, testing his healed body. The wound was closed, only a silver scar remaining. Do you know what soul bonding means, Alara Winterborn? She shook her head. It means we're connected now, forever. What you feel, I'll feel echoes of. Where you go, I'll know. If you die, part of me dies with you. He turned away, looking deeper into the forest. And if I return to the Winter Court, which I must, eventually, you'll be executed for bonding with royalty. It's Fey law. That seems... Alara searched for words. Unreasonable. It's politics. He glanced back at her, and she saw centuries of weariness in his face. I was meant to marry Lady Morwenna of the Autumn Court, a union that would end the seasonal wars, bring peace to the Fey realms. I refused. I was exiled for it, stripped of title and lands, sent to wander the mortal world until I reconsidered. His jaw tightened. Someone decided exile wasn't punishment enough. The Iron Blade. Assassin from the Summer Court, I think. They want the war to continue. He moved closer, studying her face with disturbing intensity. You're already changing. I can see it. Your eyes have silver flecks now. Your breath produces frost. The bond is aggressive, pulling us together. Alara touched her face, felt the unnatural cold of her own skin. Can it be broken? Yes. The word came quietly, but not without cost. What cost? Elendor met her eyes. One of us has to die. Silence settled between them, heavy as the mist. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called. The forest seemed to be holding its breath, waiting to see what these two unlikely bonded souls would choose. Finally, Alara stood. Her legs felt strange, stronger and lighter simultaneously. Then I suppose we'd better figure out another option. Because I didn't save your life just to have you die breaking this bond, and I'm rather attached to continuing my own existence as well. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise again, and perhaps the tiniest hint of hope. You're not afraid. Oh, I'm terrified, she corrected. But I'm also pragmatic. We have a problem. We'll find a solution. She picked up her satchel, noting how the silver blood on her hands had dried to glittering powder. Starting with you telling me everything about this prophecy, your court politics, and why someone wants a peace marriage badly enough to kill for it. That could take all night. Alara looked at the sky, calculating. Dawn was still hours away. Good thing I don't have to open my shop until noon tomorrow. Come on, My cottage is warded, and I have tea. Whatever's coming for us, we'll face it better with warmth and planning." She started walking, then paused when she realized he wasn't following. She turned back to find him staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What?" she asked. 3 centuries, Elendor said softly. 3 centuries of existence, and I've never met a mortal who'd invite a Fey prince into their home after learning they're now magically bound and politically doomed together. He shook his head slowly. "You're either the bravest person I've ever encountered or the most foolish." "Probably both," Ilara admitted. Are you coming or not?" He smiled, then truly smiled, and it transformed his face from beautiful to devastating. "I'm coming, Ilara Winterborn. Though I suspect I was coming the moment you chose to save me, despite every intelligent instinct telling you to run." They walked back through the forest together, 2 souls now bound by prophecy and choice, neither knowing that the Winter Court had already sensed the bond's formation, that emissaries were being dispatched, that Lady Morwenna had stood before the court and declared this an act of war, that their love story had begun with mercy, but would be tested by forces neither world nor magic could easily overcome. For now, though, there was just the walk through silver mist, the warmth of a cottage appearing through the trees, and the strange comfort of knowing they weren't facing the impossible alone. The prophecy had woken, and everything would change. Dawn broke cold and silver over Silverwood Forest. Ilara woke to find frost patterns on the inside of her windows. Impossible, considering she'd kept the fire burning all night. She sat up slowly, her body feeling strange, lighter somehow, as if gravity had loosened its grip. The events of the previous night crashed back. The dying Fey prince, the silver blood, the blinding light, the soul bond, the soul bond. She pressed her palm against her chest, feeling her heartbeat, except it wasn't just hers anymore. Underneath her own steady rhythm, she felt an echo, slower, colder, ancient. Elendor's heart, beating somewhere nearby. He was still in her cottage. She'd given him the small guest room, the one her grandmother had used during the last months of her life. It seemed surreal now, having a Fey prince sleeping under her roof. She'd made tea. They'd talked until exhaustion overtook fear, and he'd accepted her hospitality with a grave courtesy that spoke of centuries of court training. Ilara dressed quickly, noting the silver flecks in her eyes that now dominated the green. Her breath came out in visible frost clouds despite the room's warmth. The changes were accelerating. She found Elendor in her kitchen, standing motionless before the window. He was still wearing yesterday's ruined clothes, the bloodstains now dried to silver dust. His dark hair caught the morning light, and she noticed details she'd missed in darkness. The slight point to his ears, the way his skin seemed to glow faintly from within, the absolute stillness of him between breaths. Faye didn't fidget, didn't make unconscious human movements. They could hold perfectly still in a way that reminded you they were fundamentally other. "You feel it too," he said without turning. "Not a question. Your heartbeat, yes." Ilara moved to the stove, needing something normal to do with her hands. "Tea?" "They're coming." His voice was flat. The court felt the bond form. They'll send emissaries. "How long do we have?" "They arrived an hour ago. They're waiting at the forest edge, observing protocol by not approaching until dawn fully breaks." He finally turned to face her, and she saw the tension in his frame. "Ilara, you need to understand what's about to happen. The Winter Court doesn't negotiate. They don't compromise. They'll offer you one choice: break the bond and accept death, or flee and be hunted forever. What about you?" "I'll be dragged back to face the Queen's justice, likely imprisoned until I agree to the political marriage I refused." His jaw tightened. "Or they'll simply execute me for oath-breaking and use my death as excuse to continue the war." Alara poured hot water over tea leaves, watching the steam rise. And if we refuse both options, then we fight. He moved closer, and she felt the bond pulse between them. Awareness, connection, something deeper than mere proximity. But you're mortal, Alara. Newly changed, yes, but still mortal. They are the Winter Court's finest warriors and diplomats. We cannot win. Maybe not. She handed him a cup, noting how frost crept across the ceramic where his fingers touched. But I didn't survive 10 years alone on this mountain by giving up easily. And I definitely didn't save your life last night, just to hand you over to people who want to use you as a political pawn. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, gratitude, and something warmer she wasn't ready to examine. You're remarkably calm about facing certain death. I'm terrified, she corrected. But panic doesn't help. Strategy does. So tell me, what do they want most? Peace between the courts. The seasonal wars have raged for 500 years. Thousands dead, territories destroyed, magic itself destabilizing because we can't stop fighting. He set the untouched tea down. My marriage to Lady Morwenna would unite winter and autumn, create alliance strong enough to pressure spring and summer into treaty. Why did you refuse? Because... He stopped, jaw working. Because I won't be a breeding stallion for political convenience. Because Morwenna deserves better than arranged marriage to someone who will never love her. Because I've lived 3 centuries watching Fae sacrifice everything for power, and I'm tired of it. Before Alara could respond, 3 sharp knocks echoed through the cottage. Not on the door, on reality itself. The sound reverberated in her bones, and she knew instinctively that this was Fae announcement. They were here. Aelendor's expression went carefully blank, court mask sliding into place. Stay behind me, say nothing unless directly addressed, and whatever happens, don't accept any gifts, food, or bargains. I know the rules, Alara said quietly. Her grandmother had taught her well. Shall we? They opened the door together. 3 figures stood in her garden, and they were magnificent and terrible. The first was a woman tall as any man, skin pale blue and covered in frost patterns, white hair flowing to her waist like snow and wind. She wore armor made of ice that moved like liquid, and her eyes were frozen lakes, beautiful and deadly. The second was male, dark where she was pale, with antlers growing from his temples and autumn leaves woven through his hair. His skin held the rich brown of oak bark, and his eyes glowed amber. He wore robes the color of dying leaves, and power radiated from him like heat. The third made Alara's breath catch. She was small, delicate, impossibly beautiful with features that hurt to look at directly. Silver blonde hair, silver eyes, skin like moonlight. She wore a gown of winter starlight, and something about her presence felt ancient and absolute. Lady Morwenna, it had to be. Prince Aelendor of the Winter Court, the Ice Warrior said formally. You stand in violation of exile terms. You have formed a soul bond with a mortal, triggering ancient prophecy. You are hereby commanded to return and face the Queen's justice. Lady Crystalline. Aelendor's voice matched her formality. I violated no terms. I was ambushed by Summer Court assassins and left to die. This mortal showed mercy. The bond formed without intent or knowledge. Intent is irrelevant. The autumn male spoke, voice like rustling leaves. The prophecy is clear. When mortal hand touches royal blood with pure intent, the veil between worlds shall shatter, and choice shall tear both realms apart. You have endangered both worlds with your carelessness. Lord Thornwick, the prophecy is 3,000 years old and has 17 contradictory interpretations, Aelendor countered. No one even knows if... I know. Lady Morwenna's voice was soft, musical, and utterly commanding. Everyone fell silent. She stepped forward, studying Alara with disturbing intensity. You're Elara Winterbourne, the herbalist. Yes, my lady. Elara kept her voice steady. Do you know what you've done? I saved a dying man's life. You've bound yourself to exiled royalty. You've triggered prophecy that could merge our worlds or destroy them both. You've complicated peace negotiations that could end 500 years of war. Morwenna tilted her head. And you feel no remorse? I feel terror, Elara admitted. But no, I don't regret saving his life. Would you? Silence stretched. Then, impossibly, Morwenna smiled. It was a small thing, barely there, but genuine. No, I wouldn't. She turned to Aelindor. She's nothing like I expected. She's nothing like anyone expects, he said quietly. Morwenna studied them both for a long moment, something calculating in her ancient eyes. Then she made a decision that changed everything. I invoke right of challenge. The other two Fae recoiled. My lady, you cannot. I can, and I do. Morwenna's voice rang with authority. As the wronged party in this bond-breaking of political arrangement, I claim right to set terms of resolution rather than follow standard protocol. Lady Morwenna, Crystalline said carefully, the Queen will not approve. The Queen gave me full authority over this matter. I'm using it. She looked at Elara and Aelindor. You have 7 days. 7 days to come to the Winter Court. Present yourselves before the assembled nobles, and prove that your bond serves the prophecy's true purpose. Unity, not destruction. And if we can't prove it? Aelindor asked. Then you submit to execution, and the mortal accepts painless death. Morwenna's expression was unreadable. Those are my terms. Accept or refuse. Why are you doing this? Elara asked. You're supposed to want him back. You're supposed to want me dead. I'm supposed to want a lot of things. Something flickered across Morwenna's perfect features. Pain, perhaps, or regret. But I've lived 1,000 years, Elara Winterbourne. I've seen countless arranged marriages, political bonds, duty-driven unions. I've never once seen someone look at another the way Aelindor looked at you when you opened that door. She turned to leave, the other two following. 7 days. Use them wisely. They vanished between one breath and the next, simply ceasing to exist in the mortal world. Aelindor exhaled slowly, tension draining from his frame. That was unexpected. She's helping us. Elara's mind raced. Why would she help us? I don't know. Morwenna is brilliant and ruthless, and I've never been able to predict her. He ran a hand through his hair, a surprisingly human gesture. 7 days. 7 days to prove our bond has purpose, or die together. Then we'd better start researching. Elara moved back inside, already planning. You said the prophecy has 17 interpretations. I want to hear all of them. I want to know everything about soul bonds, Winter Court politics, and why everyone's so terrified of the veil between worlds shattering. Elara. No. She turned to face him. We have 7 days. We're not wasting them on despair. You've lived 3 centuries. I've spent 10 years studying everything I could about healing, magic, herbs, folklore. Between us, we can figure this out. He stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he smiled. Not the devastatingly beautiful smile from last night, but something softer, more genuine. You really don't give up, do you? Not when lives are at stake, especially not when one of them is mine. She pulled out her grandmother's journal, the one filled with notes about Fae lore. Now sit, talk. Tell me everything. He sat, and he talked. For hours, Aelindor explained the intricate politics of the Fae courts, the history of the seasonal wars, the nature of soul bonds. Elara took notes frantically, her mind working through possibilities. The bond between them pulsed steadily, growing stronger with each passing hour. And she noticed things. The way his eyes followed her movements. The way he leaned slightly toward her even while sitting still. The way touching him no longer felt cold, but perfectly temperature matched to her own changing body. The bond wanted them closer, wanted them together. It was aggressive in its purpose, and fighting it took conscious effort. The prophecy's original text, Elendor said, as afternoon light slanted through windows, was written in Old Fae. The phrase everyone translates as shatter the veil could also mean open the veil or transform the veil. The phrase for choice shall tear could be choice shall unite. Language has changed over 3 millennia. So it might not be a destruction prophecy at all, Elara murmured, writing faster. It might be about finally creating real connection between mortal and Fae worlds, which the courts fear because connection means change, means losing control. She looked up, excitement building. Elendor. What if that's the whole point? What if soul bonds between mortal and Fae are meant to prevent war by creating stakes in both worlds? You can't easily destroy something when part of you exists there. He went very still, the way Fae did when processing something profound. That would mean the courts have been deliberately suppressing soul bonds for centuries, killing any that form, keeping our worlds separate because unity threatens their power. Can you prove it? Maybe. Hope kindled in his silver eyes. The ancient records are in the Winter Court's vault. If we could access them, then that's what we do. We go to the Winter Court, we find proof, and we present it before the assembled nobles. Elara stood, decision made. 7 days. That's barely enough time to prepare, but it's what we have. Elendor stood as well, moving close enough that she could feel the cold radiating from him. You understand what you're proposing? Walking into the Winter Court is walking into the heart of danger. They could kill us the moment we arrive. They could, but Morwenna gave us terms. That means she wants us to succeed. Elara met his eyes. Why else would she offer 7 days instead of immediate execution? I don't know, but I intend to find out. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered, and the bond flared between them. Warmth despite his cold touch, connection that went soul deep. Thank you, Elara Winterborn, for saving me, for not giving up, for being stubborn enough to believe we can change 3,000 years of fear and politics. Thank you for being worth saving, she replied softly. They stood there for a moment, bound souls in a small cottage, balanced on the knife's edge between hope and doom. Outside, Silverwood Forest whispered ancient secrets, and somewhere in the Fae realm, the Winter Court prepared for their arrival. 7 days until they faced impossible odds. 7 days to prove love could unite worlds instead of destroying them. 7 days to survive. The countdown had begun. The gateway between worlds opened at midnight on the 3rd day. Elara stood at the forest's edge, her travel pack secured across her shoulders, watching as Elendor traced symbols in the air with silver glowing fingers. Each gesture left trails of light that hung suspended, building into an intricate circular pattern. The symbols were Old Fae, he'd explained. The language that existed before humans had words, when magic itself was young. Once we cross, he said without pausing his work, time moves differently. An hour there might be 3 here, or vice versa. Don't eat anything unless I tell you it's safe. Don't accept gifts. Don't make promises, even casual ones. Fae take all promises as binding contracts. You've told me this 17 times, Elara said, but without irritation. She understood his anxiety. They'd spent 3 days preparing, gathering information from her grandmother's journals, practicing mental shields against Fae manipulation, learning court protocols. 3 days of growing closer, despite trying to maintain professional distance. The bond made that impossible. She knew now that he took his tea without honey, that he couldn't sleep in complete darkness, that he'd once loved painting but hadn't touched a brush in 2 centuries. He knew she sang while working with herbs, that she'd named every plant in her garden, that her deepest fear was becoming like her father, dying alone with work unfinished. The bond wanted them to know each other, wanted intimacy beyond physical. "I'm nervous," Eilendor admitted, adding the final symbol. The circular pattern flared brilliant white. "I was exiled. Returning means facing those who cast me out, who wanted me to break, to crawl back begging for my title and lands." His jaw tightened. "I won't beg. Not for them. You're not crawling back. You're walking in to prove them all wrong." Elara stepped beside him, close enough that their arms brushed. The bond hummed contentedly at the contact. "Ready?" He looked at her, silver eyes reflecting the gateway's light. "With you?" "Yes." They stepped through together. The transition felt like being unmade and remade simultaneously. Alara's consciousness scattered across dimensions, saw colors that didn't exist in the mortal spectrum, heard music that was mathematics made audible. Then reality snapped back, and she was stumbling forward onto ground that sparkled like diamond dust. The winter court stole her breath. They stood in a valley of ice and starlight. Massive palace walls rose ahead, carved from single glaciers that glowed with internal luminescence. Towers spiraled upward, defying physics, their peaks lost in swirling aurora. Gardens of frozen sculptures surrounded them, trees made entirely of ice, flowers that bloomed in crystalline perfection, fountains where water flowed upward instead of down. Everything was beautiful. Everything was cold. Everything felt ancient and powerful and utterly inhuman. "Welcome to my former home," Eilendor said quietly. Figures approached from the palace, 6 fae in ice armor, moving with predatory grace. Their leader, a tall male with frost-white hair and eyes like frozen lightning, stopped 10 paces away. "Prince Eilendor, the mortal." "You're expected." "Captain Glacium." Eilendor's voice went formal, court-trained. "We come under Lady Morwenna's terms. 7 days to present our case. The lady awaits in the Hall of Frozen Stars. You'll be escorted." Glacium's gaze moved to Elara, assessing. "The mortal will be housed in guest quarters, separately." "No." Eilendor's tone allowed no argument. "The soul bond requires proximity. Separation causes pain. She stays with me, or we leave now, and you can explain to the Queen why her carefully arranged trial collapsed." Glacium's expression flickered. Surprise, perhaps respect. "Very well. Follow." They walked through gardens where fae nobles paused to stare. Elara felt their gazes like physical weight, judging, calculating. She heard whispers in Old Fae, too fast for her limited understanding, but caught repeated words: prophecy, mortal, bond, destruction. "Ignore them," Eilendor murmured. "They fear what they don't understand." The palace interior was impossibly vast, corridors stretched in mathematically perfect lines, walls carved with scenes from fae history. They passed halls where nobles gathered in careful political clusters, chambers where magic was worked in visible patterns, libraries where books were made of ice that somehow held printed words. Finally, they reached the Hall of Frozen Stars. The chamber was circular, its ceiling a dome showing the night sky. Not painted, but actual sky, somehow captured and held overhead. Stars wheeled in accelerated motion, and aurora danced in ribbons of color. The floor was mirror-smooth ice that reflected everything, creating the illusion of infinite space. At the chamber's far end sat the Winter Queen. She was ancient power made manifest. Tall, impossibly beautiful, with skin like fresh snow and hair that moved like blizzard wind. Her crown was ice that never melted, and her gown shifted between solid and vapor. Eyes older than mountains fixed on them as they approached, and Alara felt the weight of that gaze testing her, probing, searching for weakness. Lady Morwenna stood beside the throne, expression unreadable. Elendor, son of my sister's line, oathbreaker and exile. The queen's voice resonated with power that vibrated in Alara's bones. You return with mortal in tow, claiming soul bond triggered by prophecy. Explain yourself. Elendor bowed, not submissive but respectful. Your Majesty, I was attacked by Summer Court assassins 3 days past, left dying from iron poisoning in Silverwood Forest. This mortal, Elara Winterborn, found me. She extracted the iron, healed the wound, triggered the bond unknowingly. He straightened. We come seeking access to the ancient records, to understand the prophecy's true meaning before we're judged for violating it. The prophecy is understood. It speaks of destruction. With respect, Majesty, it speaks in Old Fae, which has multiple translations. Do not lecture me on my own language, exile. Frost crept across the floor toward them. You claim pure accident. I see political maneuvering. You refuse the marriage we arranged. Now you bind yourself to mortal to avoid duty. That's not what happened, Elara said. Everyone turned to stare at her. She felt the attention like knives, but continued. I'm a healer. I found someone dying. I helped. That's all. That's all? The queen's laugh was winter wind. Mortal child, you understand nothing. Soul bonds don't form randomly. They require resonance, compatibility of spirit, alignment of purpose, depth of connection. Such things don't happen from single healing touch. She leaned forward. Which means either you're lying, or the bond recognized something neither of you admits. Which is it? Elara felt the bond pulse, felt Elendor's tension through their connection. The queen was right. Soul bonds required more than accident. They'd formed too quickly, too strongly, which meant, we're compatible, she admitted quietly. In ways I don't fully understand. But that doesn't make our request less valid. If the prophecy is about unity rather than destruction, Your Majesty, doesn't that matter? Doesn't that change everything? Silence stretched, then Morwenna spoke. I believe they deserve the opportunity to research Your Majesty. 7 days, as I promised. If they find nothing, they submit to judgment. If they find proof the prophecy serves unity, we reconsider our stance on soul bonds entirely. And risk exposing our realm to mortal chaos. We risk learning that we've spent 3 millennia operating under false assumptions, Morwenna countered smoothly. Maintaining wars based on misinterpreted prophecy. Killing soul-bonded pairs who might have been bridges to peace. She paused. Isn't wisdom worth 7 days of risk? The queen studied them all. Finally. Very well. 7 days. You'll have access to the restricted archives. But... Her gaze fixed on Elara like targeting prey. You, mortal, will be tested. If you survive the trials I set, perhaps you're worthy of the bond you claim. If not, your death proves the prophecy's destructive nature. What trials? Elendor demanded. 3 tests, 3 chances to prove herself. The queen smiled, cold and sharp. Beginning tomorrow at dawn, succeed, and continue your research. Fail any test, and both of you die immediately. Those are my terms. Your Majesty, accept or leave, Elendor. Choose now. Elara felt his fear through the bond, his protective rage at the unfair terms. But she also felt his hope, his desperate need to prove they could survive this. She squeezed his hand once, quick and reassuring. We accept, she said clearly. The queen's smile widened. Excellent. Captain Glacium will show you to your quarters. Rest well, mortal. Tomorrow we'll see if you break. They were dismissed, escorted through more impossible corridors to chambers that were elegant and cold. The moment the door closed, Elendor spun to face her. You shouldn't have agreed. The Queen's tests are designed to kill— I know. Alara set down her pack, hands steady despite inner trembling. But we needed access to the archives. Now we have it. We have 7 days. So tomorrow I survive whatever she throws at me, and we keep researching. Alara, I'm terrified, Aelendor. I'm so scared I can barely breathe. She turned to him. But I'm also sure that we're right, that the prophecy is being misused, that soul bonds could end wars instead of causing them. She moved closer. I won't give up. Not on this. Not on us. He pulled her into his arms without thinking, and she went willingly. The bond sang between them, contentment mixing with fear, mixing with something deeper neither was ready to name. His cold seeped into her bones, but she'd grown accustomed to it. It felt right now, felt like home. I can't lose you, he whispered against her hair. Then help me survive. She pulled back to meet his eyes. Teach me everything you know about Fae trials. We have until dawn. Let's not waste it. They worked through the night, Aelendor explaining trial types while Alara absorbed information with desperate focus. Outside their window, the stolen sky wheeled overhead, and somewhere in the palace's depths, the ancient records waited. 7 days had become 6. 3 trials stood between them and answers. And the Winter Queen smiled in her frozen throne, certain the mortal would break. Dawn in the Winter Court arrived without sun. Alara woke to find the sky dome overhead shifting from deep indigo to pale silver, stars fading into luminescent mist. She'd managed perhaps 2 hours of actual sleep, the rest spent lying awake beside Aelendor. They'd discovered separation beyond a few feet caused sharp pain through the bond, reviewing everything he'd taught her about Fae trials. They'll test 3 things, he'd explained in the pre-dawn hours: mind, heart, and will. The Queen wants to prove you're weak, that mortals can't handle Fae power. She'll design each trial to exploit what she perceives as your greatest vulnerability. Now, as Alara dressed in the simple gray gown provided by palace servants, she tried to steady her racing heart. Through the bond, she felt Aelendor's fear for her, his helpless rage at not being able to protect her from what was coming. "I'll be right there," he said, helping her lace the gown. His fingers were gentle despite their cold. "I can't interfere, but I'll be watching. And through the bond, you'll feel me. You won't be alone." She turned to face him. Whatever happens, don't try to stop it. If you interfere, they'll kill us both immediately. Alara, promise me." She gripped his hands. "I can survive this, but only if you let me." His jaw worked. "Finally, I promise. But if they push too far, if you're actually dying, then you trust I'll find a way through." She kissed his cheek quickly, surprising them both. Come on. Let's see what your queen considers a fair test." The trial chamber was deep in the palace's heart, a circular arena surrounded by tiered seating already filled with Fae nobles. Alara felt hundreds of ancient eyes tracking her as Aelendor led her to the chamber floor. The space was bare except for 3 doorways carved into the walls: ice, obsidian, and crystal. The Winter Queen sat in a throne of frozen starlight, Morwenna standing beside her. Captain Glacium and other court officials filled the front rows. This was formal, official, designed as much for political theater as actual testing. Alara Winterborn. The Queen's voice filled the chamber. "You stand soul-bonded to my exiled nephew, claiming prophecy as justification. Today, we test whether a mortal possesses strength worthy of such connection. 3 trials. Survive all 3, and you may continue your research. Fail even 1, and you both die. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Majesty." "Then we begin. The first trial, mind." The Queen gestured, and the ice doorway began to glow. Beyond that door lies a labyrinth of memory and madness. Navigate it successfully, reach the center, claim the token waiting there. You have 1 hour. Time flows differently inside. What feels like hours may be mere minutes, or vice versa. Lose yourself in the memories, and you'll wander forever while your body dies here. Alara's throat went dry. A mental trial, designed to trap her in her own worst memories. She glanced at Elendor, felt his steady presence through the bond like an anchor point. "I'm ready," she said. The ice door opened. Cold mist poured out, smelling of winter and something older. Alara walked forward, feeling every eye upon her, and stepped into darkness. The transition was immediate and disorienting. She stood in her childhood home, the small cottage where she'd grown up. But it was wrong. Walls breathing, furniture melting, her mother's voice calling from everywhere and nowhere. "Alara, help me. I'm burning, I'm burning. Why won't you help me?" Not real. Not real. This is the trial. But it felt real. She felt the heat of her mother's fever, smelled sickness in the air, heard her father crying in the next room. The memory she'd buried deepest, watching her mother die while she was too young, too untrained, too helpless to save her. "You could have saved me," her mother's voice whispered. "If you'd been better, smarter, stronger." Alara closed her eyes, breathed deep. "You're not my mother. You're the trial testing my guilt." She opened her eyes. "And I've made peace with that loss. I was 9 years old. I did everything I could." The scene shattered like glass. She stood now in a field of frozen corpses. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all staring at her with accusing eyes. "You'll fail them too," they whispered in unison. "Everyone you try to save, everyone you touch. The bond will kill Elendor just like your healing failed us." This was her deepest fear, that she'd cause more harm than good, that her help was worthless, that everyone she cared for would suffer for knowing her. But through the bond, she felt Elendor's heartbeat, steady, alive, real. "I saved him," she said firmly. "I've saved hundreds of others. I won't let fear of failure stop me from trying." The corpses dissolved into mist. The labyrinth shifted around her, walls rising and falling, paths opening and closing. She walked forward with purpose now, understanding the trial's nature. It fed on doubt, on unresolved trauma, on fears given power through belief. She had to acknowledge the fears without letting them control her. More scenes appeared. Her father bleeding out while the drunk doctor stumbled uselessly. Her grandmother's final days when no herbs could stop death's approach. Every patient she'd lost, every life she couldn't save, paraded before her in vivid detail. Each time, she acknowledged the pain, accepted the loss, refused to let it define her. The labyrinth couldn't trap someone who'd already faced their demons. Finally, she reached the center. A small chamber with pedestal holding a single ice rose. The token. She picked it up carefully, felt it pulse with cold magic, and the labyrinth dissolved. She stood back in the arena, gasping. Elendor was suddenly there, steadying her, his relief flooding through the bond. The assembled nobles murmured in surprise. 17 minutes, the queen said, something like respect in her voice. Most mortals take 40 before breaking completely. Well done. But the first trial is easiest. She gestured to the obsidian door. The second trial. Heart. Beyond that door, you'll face a choice. We'll see what you truly value. Alara barely had time to catch her breath before the obsidian door opened. This time, Elendor squeezed her hand once, wordless support, before she walked forward. The darkness beyond was absolute. Then light bloomed, and she stood in a forest clearing. 2 figures knelt before her, both bound in chains of ice, Elendor on the left and on the right. Her breath caught. It was her father. Younger, healthy, exactly as she remembered him before the accident. "Choose," a voice said from everywhere. "Save one. The other dies. You have 60 seconds. "This isn't real," Elara said immediately. "My father is already dead." "Does that matter? This version is real enough. Save him, and he lives. A second chance to have your father back. Or choose the Fey Prince you've known mere days. 60 seconds. Choose." Her heart hammered. She looked at her father, the man who'd taught her herb names, who'd sung her to sleep, who she'd watched die helplessly. A chance to undo that grief, to have him back. But it wasn't real. Wasn't truly him. And more importantly, "Elendor," she said clearly. "I choose Elendor." "Why?" the voice demanded. "Your father, or someone you barely know." "Because my father died years ago. I've mourned him, honored him, lived the life he wanted for me. This version is illusion crafted to tempt me." She looked at Elendor's image. "But Elendor is real. Our bond is real. And I don't abandon people I've sworn to help, not even for comfortable fantasies of the past." The scene dissolved. She stood again in the arena, and this time she noticed the Queen leaning forward slightly, genuine interest in her expression. "Interesting," the Queen murmured. "You value reality over comfort, loyalty over sentiment." She paused. "The third trial will test whether that conviction holds when the cost becomes unbearable." The crystal door opened. This time, Elendor tried to hold her back. "Elara, wait, I have to." She kissed his hand quickly. "Trust me." She stepped through into blinding white light. When her vision cleared, she stood in the archive room she'd been seeking. Endless shelves of ice books, ancient records, everything they needed. And there, on a pedestal, glowed a book labeled Original Prophecy. "Take it," a voice said. The Winter Queen materialized beside her, but different, softer, tired. "Take the book. It contains the proof you seek, the truth about soul bonds, about the prophecy's real meaning, everything you need to save yourself and Elendor." "What's the cost?" Elara asked warily. "Elendor loses his memory of you, completely. The bond remains, but he won't remember falling in love, won't remember your time together, won't remember choosing you over duty." The Queen's expression was unreadable. "You'll have your proof, save both your lives, but he'll see you as a stranger he's magically bound to. No shared history, no foundation of trust, just obligation." Elara's hands shook. Through the bond, she felt Elendor's presence, his care for her, his growing feelings, everything they'd built in mere days. "Why?" she whispered. "Why this choice? Because love requires sacrifice. But which matters more, his memory of love or his life?" The Queen watched her carefully. "Choose wisely, mortal. This is your final test." Elara looked at the book, looked at the Queen, felt Elendor's heartbeat through the bond. Then she smiled, sudden and fierce. "No," she said clearly. "No. No, I refuse your false choice. If the prophecy is about unity, about bridge building between worlds, then it requires trust, genuine connection." She stepped back from the book. "Saving Elendor's life isn't worth erasing what makes our bond real. We'll find another way." "There is no other way." "Then we die with our memories intact." Elara met the Queen's eyes. "Because a life saved through betrayal isn't worth living." For a long moment, silence. Then the Queen began to laugh, not mocking, but genuine and surprised. "You refuse salvation to preserve integrity. Remarkable." The scene dissolved, and they stood in the arena. The Queen was smiling. "You pass, Elara Winterborn. All 3 trials. Mind strong enough to face truth. Heart loyal enough to choose reality. will stubborn enough to reject false salvation. The assembled nobles erupted in murmurs. Aelendor pulled her close, relief and pride flooding the bond. "You have your 7 days," the queen announced. "Access to archives is granted. Find your proof, or face judgment. But know this, mortal. You've earned my respect. Whatever comes next, you've proven worthy of it." As they were escorted out, Morwenna caught Alara's eye and nodded once, small and approving. The trials were over. The real work was just beginning. The archives were older than human civilization. Alara stood in the vast chamber, overwhelmed by the sheer scope of knowledge surrounding her. Ice shelves stretched into impossible distances, each holding books that shimmered with preservation magic. The air tasted of ancient cold and forgotten secrets, and she could feel the weight of millennia pressing down. "The 3,000 years of records," Aelendor murmured beside her, his hand finding hers automatically. The bond hummed contentedly at the contact. "Everything from the first courts to present day. Somewhere in here is the original prophecy text." They'd been searching for 4 days now. 4 days of reading by magical light that never dimmed, of deciphering old Fae texts with Aelendor's patient translations, of finding tantalizing hints but never complete answers. Time was running out. 3 days remained before they had to present their findings to the court. "Here," Alara said, pulling a volume bound in crystal. "This one references soul bonds in the Second Age, before the courts formed." Aelendor moved close, reading over her shoulder. His breath was cold against her neck, and she'd stopped noticing the chill days ago. Everything about him felt natural now. The ice touch of his skin, the winter scent surrounding him, the steady pulse of his ancient heartbeat beneath her own. "And in the time before division," he read aloud, "mortal and Fae walked together. Soul bonds formed freely, creating children of both worlds who carried magic and mortality in equal measure. These bridge-born prevented war through their very existence. Who would destroy a realm where their own children lived?" Alara's heart raced. Bridgeborn, children of soul-bonded pairs. Aelendor, if soul bonds created hybrid children who belonged to both worlds, then killing soul-bonded pairs wasn't about protecting the realms. It was about maintaining separation. His voice went hard. About keeping power consolidated in the courts, rather than distributed among Bridgeborn who owed loyalty to both sides. "Keep reading," Alara urged. "In the courts feared dilution of pure Fae bloodlines, feared mortals gaining immortality through bonding, feared losing control as Bridgeborn populations grew. So they declared soul bonds dangerous, twisted prophecy to support their claim, and began systematically eliminating any who formed such connections." Aelendor's hands shook. "And they've been lying for 3,000 years. Where's the original prophecy?" Alara scanned the shelves frantically. "We need the actual text, not interpretations." They searched with renewed urgency, pulling volumes, cross-referencing, following citation trails deeper into the archives. Hours blurred together. Alara's eyes burned from reading by magical light, and her hands were numb from handling ice-cold books, but she refused to stop. Finally, in the oldest section where even the shelves looked ancient, Aelendor found it. "Here." His voice was barely audible. "The Prophecy of Unity." Original text, First Age. The book he held looked different from the others, smaller, bound in something that wasn't quite ice and wasn't quite crystal. The text inside glowed with its own light, words written in Old Fae so archaic even Aelendor struggled to read it. "Or, when mortal hand touches royal blood with pure intent," he translated slowly, "the veil between worlds shall open, and choice shall unite both realms. Bridgeborn shall walk again, carrying peace in their very existence. The age of separation ends. The age of unity begins." He looked up, eyes wide. "It's not about destruction. It never was. It's about reunification. They changed it, Fury built in Alara's chest. The courts deliberately mistranslated it to justify killing soul-bonded pairs, to maintain their power structure. For 3 millennia. Aelendor's expression was terrible to witness. Centuries of lies collapsing, understanding of his entire world shattering. Every soul-bonded pair they executed, every Bridgeborn child they killed, all to preserve court supremacy. A slow clap echoed through the archives. They spun to find Lady Morwenna standing between the shelves, her expression unreadable. "Congratulations. You found the truth we've hidden for 30 centuries. Aelendor moved protectively in front of Alara. "You knew." "Of course I knew. The Queen knows. All the court leaders know." Morwenna approached slowly. "We've maintained the lie because the alternative is chaos. Do you understand what would happen if soul bonds formed freely again? If mortals gained immortality and magic through bonding? If Fae gained mortality's fire and passion? If Bridgeborn children challenged our pure bloodlines?" "Peace would happen," Alara said fiercely. "People who loved across both worlds wouldn't let them destroy each other." "Or," Morwenna countered, "desperate mortals would hunt Fae to force bonds. Fae would enslave mortals as breeding stock. Wars would erupt over who controlled Bridgeborn children, the very things we feared 30 centuries ago." She stopped a few paces away. "The separation isn't just tyranny. It's protection." "From what?" Aelendor demanded. "From people loving each other? From people exploiting each other?" Morwenna's mask cracked slightly. "I'm 1,000 years old. I remember the last Bridgeborn child. Her name was Starling. She was 6 when Summer Court killed her to prevent Autumn from gaining a magical heir. I held her while she died. Aelendor." I felt her confusion as she asked why nobody wanted her to exist. Silence fell heavy. Alara felt the weight of that history, the real fear beneath the political maneuvering. "But that doesn't make extermination right," she said quietly. "Preventing abuse doesn't require preventing all bonds. There has to be middle ground." "Is there?" Morwenna looked at them both. "Can you honestly tell me that if soul bonds became public knowledge, mortals wouldn't hunt Fae? That Fae wouldn't exploit mortals? That we wouldn't see the exact horrors we prevented? Not if we establish protections," Alara argued. "Laws that prevent forced bonding, sanctuaries for Bridgeborn, agreements between courts and mortal kingdoms that anyone harming soul-bonded pairs faces justice from both sides. You're describing a completely restructured society." "Yes." Alara stepped forward. "Because the current structure is built on murder and lies. You just admitted the courts have been executing innocent people for 3,000 years. How is that better than the risks of allowing love?" Morwenna studied her for a long moment. Then, impossibly, she smiled. "You argue like Fae. I see why the prophecy chose you." She gestured to the book. "Take that to the Queen. Present your findings at tomorrow's court session. Make your case." "You're letting us?" Aelendor was suspicious. "I'm giving you rope to either save yourselves or hang yourselves with—" Morwenna's expression went serious. "The Queen already knows what you found. These archives are monitored. She's waiting to see what you'll do with the truth. Will you demand immediate change and spark chaos? Will you propose gradual reform? Will you prove that soul bonds can work without destroying everything?" She turned to leave. "Choose wisely. The fate of 2 worlds rests on how you present this tomorrow." She vanished between the shelves, leaving them alone with their devastating discovery. Aelendor sank against a shelf, looking lost. 300 years. I've existed for 300 years believing the court's version of history, believing soul bonds were dangerous, that the prophecy threatened destruction. His voice cracked. "How many did I watch die, Alara? How many soul-bonded pairs were executed during my lifetime while I stood by, thinking it necessary?" She moved to him, cupping his face gently. "You didn't know. None of you knew the truth." "We should have questioned," should have looked deeper. He pulled her close, desperate for connection. What if Morwenna's right? What if revealing this truth causes the exact horrors she described? Or what if it prevents them? Alara felt the bond pulse between them, strong and sure. We're proof it can work. We formed a bond without coercion. We're choosing each other despite impossible obstacles. We're building something genuine. One example doesn't prove systematic safety. No, but it's a start. She pulled back to meet his eyes. Tomorrow, we present the truth. We acknowledge the risks. We propose protections. We ask for a trial period. Maybe just a few carefully chosen soul bonds, monitored and protected, to prove it can work without chaos. The Queen will never agree. Maybe not, but we try anyway. Alara managed a tired smile. I didn't survive 3 trials just to give up now. He kissed her then, sudden and desperate. Not their first kiss. They'd shared several over the past days as the bond pulled them closer. But this one felt different. Final, somehow. As if he was trying to memorize her in case everything fell apart tomorrow. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. If this goes wrong, if they execute us tomorrow, then we die knowing we tried to change 3,000 years of injustice. She threaded her fingers through his. Together, that's worth something. It's worth everything. His voice was rough. You're worth everything. They stayed in the archives until exhaustion forced them back to their chambers. Tomorrow, they would face the Winter Court with truth that could either revolutionize 2 worlds or condemn them to death. As Alara drifted into uneasy sleep, pressed against Aelindor's cold side with the bond humming steadily between them, she thought about Starling, the 6-year-old Bridgeborn child who died because nobody wanted her to exist. Tomorrow, they would argue for a world where children like Starling could live, whatever the cost. The Hall of Frozen Stars was filled to capacity. Every noble of the Winter Court attended, along with representatives from autumn, spring, and summer. Word had spread that the exiled prince and his mortal soul bond had found something in the archives, something that could change everything. The air crackled with tension and anticipation, magic thickening the atmosphere until Alara could barely breathe. She stood beside Aelindor in the chamber's center, the ancient prophecy book clutched in her hands. Through the bond, she felt his steady presence, his fear and determination mirroring her own. They'd spent the night preparing their argument, knowing they'd get one chance to convince beings who'd spent 3 millennia believing lies. The Winter Queen sat upon her throne, expression unreadable. Beside her, Morwenna watched with ancient eyes that revealed nothing. Prince Aelindor, Alara Winterborn. The Queen's voice silenced all whispers. You requested formal audience to present findings from the archives. The court recognizes you. Speak. Aelindor stepped forward, and Alara felt courage flowing through the bond, borrowed strength keeping her steady. Your Majesty, assembled nobles, representatives of all courts. We come bearing truth that has been hidden for 3,000 years. He paused, letting that sink in. The prophecy you've used to justify executing soul-bonded pairs is a mistranslation, deliberately altered to support political goals rather than reflecting original meaning. Chaos erupted. Nobles shouted denial, demanded proof, called for immediate execution. The Queen raised one hand, and silence fell like a blade. Bold accusation. Nephew, prove it. Alara opened the book, hands shaking but voice clear. This is the original prophecy text, First Age, written in Old Fae before the courts divided. Aelindor will translate. He took the book, began reading. His voice carried the weight of ancient words, and even those who wanted to deny couldn't dispute his translation skill. He'd studied Old Fae for 2 centuries. When mortal hand touches royal blood with pure intent, the veil between worlds shall open, and choice shall unite both realms. Bridgeborn shall walk again, carrying peace in their very existence. The age of separation ends. The age of unity begins. He looked up. Not destruction, not shattering, unity. The prophecy speaks of reunification between our worlds. Lies, Lord Thornwick of Autumn called out. The prophecy has always warned of danger. The prophecy was rewritten in the Second Age, Ilara interrupted, pulling out a second book they'd found. Here's the court record of the Concord of Separation, where leaders from all courts agreed to preserve pure bloodlines and prevent dilution of fey magic through mortal contamination. They changed the prophecy translation to justify this decision. She passed the book to Captain Glacium, who read it with growing horror. It's authentic, he confirmed quietly. Court seal, dated Second Age year 47. The Concord explicitly mentions adjusting prophecy interpretation to support necessary separation. Silence fell, absolute and terrible. You're saying, the Summer Court representative spoke slowly, that we've been executing soul-bonded pairs based on deliberate mistranslation? For 3,000 years, Aelendor confirmed, to maintain court power structures, to prevent bridge-born children who would belong to both worlds and challenge pure Fey supremacy. But bridge-born were dangerous, another noble protested. They caused wars, destabilized courts. One child caused nothing, Morwenna said quietly. All eyes turned to her. I was there at the last bridge-born's death. Starling was her name. 6 years old, murdered by Summer Court assassins to prevent Autumn from having a magical heir. Her voice was steel. She wasn't dangerous. She was innocent. And we let her die to preserve politics. The Summer representative stood abruptly. That was strategic necessity. That was child murder. Morwenna cut him off, as was every soul-bonded pair we've executed since. The prince and his mortal are correct. We've maintained tyranny through lies. So what do you propose? The Winter Queen's voice was dangerously quiet. Reveal the truth and watch chaos erupt. Watch desperate mortals hunt Fey to force bonds. Watch Fey enslave mortals as breeding stock. The separation has kept both worlds safer than unity ever did. Has it? Ilara found her voice, stepped forward. Your Majesty, your courts have warred for 500 years, thousands dead, magic destabilizing. Is that safety? Or is that the cost of preventing natural bridges between worlds? She took a breath. We propose compromise. Not immediate revelation, but gradual change. Start with amnesty for existing soul-bonded pairs. Let them live openly under court protection. Establish laws preventing forced bonding on either side. Create sanctuaries for any bridge-born children, protected by all courts jointly. Monitor the results. If it works, slowly expand. If problems arise, address them through law rather than execution. You're asking us to overturn 3 millennia of policy based on hope, Lord Thornwick said. I'm asking you to stop murdering people based on lies, Ilara countered. And to consider that maybe, just maybe, the prophecy was right the first time. That unity prevents war better than separation ever could. The Queen stood, and the temperature plummeted. And if you're wrong, if revealing this truth causes the exact horrors we prevented, then we face them together, Aelendor said firmly. Both courts and mortal kingdoms, working to prevent abuse rather than preventing all bonds. Your Majesty, you said yesterday that Ilara proved herself worthy. She passed 3 trials designed to break mortals. She found truth you've hidden for 3,000 years. She stands here arguing for change that could cost her life. His voice rang with conviction. Boy, if soul bonds create more people like her, brave, stubborn, willing to fight for what's right, isn't that worth the risk? Silence stretched. The Queen studied them both with eyes older than mountains. Finally, she turned to Morwenna. Your assessment, lady, you've observed them most closely. They're genuine, Morwenna said, War, the bond formed through authentic care, not manipulation. They've chosen each other repeatedly despite knowing the cost. They've found truth we buried and brought it to light rather than using it for personal gain. She paused. And they're right about the child, about all the children we never let exist. We've prevented horror through creating different horror. Perhaps it's time to try another way. The Queen returned her attention to Alara and Eilendor. If I agree to trial period, carefully controlled, limited in scope, you both become test cases, every action monitored, every choice scrutinized. If you fail, if the bond proves destructive, it justifies 3,000 years of policy. Can you bear that responsibility? Yes, they said in unison. Then here are my terms. The Queen's voice carried absolute authority. Amnesty for existing soul-bonded pairs, but they must register with courts. Laws established preventing forced bonding, enforced by both Fae and mortal authorities. Any bridge-born children receive court protection and sanctuary. Trial period of 50 years, 1 generation by mortal reckoning, to assess results. Her gaze sharpened. And you two remain at court, visible proof that bonds can work. Eilendor, your exile is ended, but you'll serve as liaison between mortal and Fae interests. Alara, you'll train others in navigating both worlds. Agreed? Alara's heart raced. 50 years at court. A lifetime by mortal standards, though the bond's magic was already extending her lifespan toward Fae longevity, but it meant proving their love could work. Meant building the bridges they'd argued for. Agreed, she said. Agreed, Eilendor echoed. And then let it be recorded. The Queen struck her staff against ice, and the sound rang like bells. The concord of unity begins this day. Bridgeborn shall walk again, and if the prophecy proves true, perhaps the age of separation truly ends. The assembled nobles erupted in discussion, some approving, some horrified, all recognizing the magnitude of what just changed. Alara felt Eilendor's hand find hers. The bond singing with triumph and relief and love neither had fully admitted until this moment. They'd done it. Changed 3,000 years of policy. Opened the door for others like them. Later, as celebration, an argument continued in the hall. They slipped away to the palace gardens. Snow fell gently around them, and for the first time, it felt peaceful rather than cold. Alara turned to Eilendor, seeing him clearly. Not just the Fae prince or the soul bond partner, but the man she'd chosen and would keep choosing. 50 years, she murmured. That's a long time. It's nothing, he countered, pulling her close. I've existed 3 centuries. 50 years with you will pass like heartbeats. He kissed her forehead, then her cheeks, then her lips, gentle and reverent. Thank you. For what? For saving me, for not giving up, for being stubborn enough to argue with the Winter Queen and win. He smiled, genuinely happy for perhaps the first time in his long life. For showing me that love can be worth any risk. We're going to have to work hard, Alara said practically, even as she melted into his embrace, proving the bond works, training others, building actual bridges between worlds. I know, but we'll do it together. His expression turned serious. Alara Winterborn, I love you. I should have said it days ago, but I was afraid it would make losing you worse if we failed. We didn't fail. She reached up, cupped his face. And I love you too. Have since you told me about refusing the arranged marriage because you wouldn't be used as a political tool. Since I realized you value freedom and choice as much as I do. They stood together in falling snow, 2 souls bound by magic and choice, knowing the hard work was just beginning. There would be skeptics to convince, systems to build, bridge-born children to protect when they came. But they'd proven change was possible. The prophecy had been right all along. Unity was coming, and in a garden where winter usually killed everything, the first flowers began to bloom. Impossible roses in shades of silver and green, mortal and fey magic, combining to create something entirely new. Something beautiful. Something worth fighting for. What would you have chosen? A comfortable lie that keeps the peace, or uncomfortable truth that demands change? Which matters more? Protecting people from potential harm, or trusting them to build something better? If this story moved you, please subscribe to Mythical Hearts for more tales of impossible love between humans and mythical creatures. Every week, we bring you epic romances that challenge the boundaries between worlds. Don't forget to hit that like button. It helps us reach others yearning for stories where love conquers even the oldest lies. Until our next tale, may you find the courage to choose truth over comfort and love over fear. Thank you for listening.